Welcome to the Sunday morning service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. Bienvenidos al servicio dominical de los Unitarios Universalistas de San Miguel de Allende. And what you've just heard as prelude is a contemporary hymn, Standing on the Side of Love, which is prominently featured during transition times in most recent General Assemblies. And its lyrics describe who we are better than I can. It proclaims, we are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one, emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim, we are answering the call of love. I am Kathy Canepa, and I will be our service leader today for a service that has many voices from our fellowship describing what they experienced and took from the General Assembly of the Unitarian Universalist Association this year. If you don't know our speakers today, please read their bios in your order of service. And before entering our worship time, we have a few announcements. After the service, those on Zoom are invited to stay connected for discussion afterwards. And if you are visiting on Zoom, please type your name and where you're from into the chat box so we can greet you personally later. And for those of us here in the Aldea, join for coffee and snacks after the service, and take your coffee and snacks over to the welcome table and check out all the information and opportunities, including information about the Social Justice Foundation. And remember that you are all invited to come and bring friends on our Thursday lunch and games event, and on Zoom to join Tom's Coffee Hour on Tuesday. Now, if we have any visitors here today, would you please stand so that we can see who you are? Welcome. Thank you. Take a look. Invite them over to coffee. Find out where they're from. We have an announcement from the membership committee. They are going to be holding a special brainstorming meeting next Sunday after the service. Welcome all members who would like to share their thoughts, ideas, enthusiasm about growing our membership team. So just grab coffee and go over to the corner where they are next week. And by the way, we do record our Sunday services, and you can find a link to our previous services on our website, UUFSMA.org. And while you're there, please check out all of the events and information on how to become a member. And please know it's being updated, so check back a few times. It's going to be changing and adding things. Our opening words are from Esther Hurlburt. It is not always easy to find love at the center. There's not a set of easy instructions numbered 1 through 7 or maybe 8. I mean, it's not always easy to find love at the center. No siempre es fácil encontrar el amor en el centro. No hay un conjunto de instrucciones fáciles, numerados del 1 al 7 o tal vez 8. No siempre es fácil encontrar el amor en el centro. Today, in Covenant, we celebrate our living tradition, which invites us to take deep breaths of fresh air into the newness of every day, so our minds, hearts, and spirits will be continually nourished. Hoy en convenio celebramos nuestra tradición viva que nos invita a respirar profundamente aire fresco en la novedad de cada día, así que nuestra mente, corazón y espíritu serán continuamente nutridos. The chalice we light is a symbol of our UU faith and values. Now, let's join together in singing hymn number 145. It is in your hymnal, and the words will appear on the screen. It is called As Tranquil Streams. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and remain standing for the covenant. Together in reciting this fellowship's covenant, the promise we make of how to be in relation to each other and the larger world. I will lead us slowly, first in English, and then Sebastián will lead us in Spanish. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
Thank you. Please be seated. Our opening words today reminded us that it is not always easy to find love at the center. That love we're speaking of is not an emotion. It is a perspective or stance through which we act. But that loving stance ebbs and flows. Loving kindness, the compassionate caring we allude to in our covenant, is something we have to practice to grow it. So we now enter the time in our service when, as a community, we practice our compassion by sharing each other's joys as well as burdens with empathy. Each candle we light together signifies that what is in our hearts is held by all of us. To share a joy or concern in the future, you can email our minister, Tom Rosiello, the week before, write something on a card as you come in, or if you're on Zoom, you can type it into the chat box. Please remember that not everybody wants something shared, so only give a card if you know that person wants it announced. I invite everyone who came here electronically or in person to take a breath and get comfortable in your seats so that you can sense each other's presence. We light our first candle in celebration of Susan Newbeck, who celebrated her birthday this week. And a candle of joy that Diana Wiener came back to help usher this week. She couldn't be at the service, but we were really glad to have her come back. And I have a joy that Don and Nora will be happy together. Gerardo, I think they are. Okay. Our next candle is one of concern for our wonderful staff member, Yvonne Mendez, who is slowly recovering from dengue fever in Oaxaca and managing to get us all your OOS online today. And the next candle is of concern and support for Mark Johannigsmeyer. He welcomes being contacted for visits as he heals at home from a severe leg wound infection, and he's got his sense of humor intact. And our next candle we light as we continue to hold Carla Espinosa and Jerome with great love and sympathy following the sudden death over a week ago of Jerome's father, Ariel, who many of you know. We also light a candle for all those suffering from acute illnesses and accidents, as well as chronic illnesses, which take a continuing toll on people, but often are no longer acknowledged. And we light this next candle for the strength to give those U.S. citizens among us the drive to take part in the democratic process and work to support our values in the upcoming election in the United States, as we are able. Okay, we have no concerns in the chat. I'm glad you're all well, Zoomers. Our caring extends to our entire human family, so we light our blue and yellow candle for all the suffering on both sides resulting from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And we light our red candle, refusing to be numbed to the suffering of those living in the Middle East. Both the Israeli civilians killed, assaulted, or kidnapped on October 7th, and the tens of thousands of Palestinians killed, displaced, starving during this devastating humanitarian crisis. And now a candle and a moment of silence for all of those joys, sorrows, and concerns that have not been shared but are held unspoken in our hearts in this room and on Zoom. During the coming music, you can come forward to silently light a candle of joy or concern for one of those.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Tom Rosiello, minister of this fellowship. And as a minister, I'm automatically a delegate to the annual meeting of the Unitarian Universalist Association called General Assembly. In addition to all ministers being delegates, every one of the 1,000 plus UU congregations gets to send lay delegates, one delegate for every 50 members. So what is this gathering of ministers and lay folks representing congregations that happens each year in June? Well, as our congregation is a representative democracy, so too is the UUA. It's an organization of member congregations. That is to say, just as we elect a board that handles most of the business of our fellowship, at General Assembly, member congregations elect a board as well as individuals to fill other national positions. At GA, delegates pass a budget for the coming year, just as we do at our annual meeting. But in addition to these routine matters, there are usually several resolutions and matters of policy to address, and votes on taking a position on timely major issues where we wish to have our collective voices heard. Usually the General Assembly is held in person, moving around to various different cities in the U.S. But this year, the only other time than during COVID, it was held totally virtually. Going forward, even when it is in person, it will also be possible for delegates and others to participate by Zoom. It is a wonderful opportunity, really, for more people to be involved and for people who might not be able to travel to be delegates. But at least for me, it does not have the same impact as actually being there with colleagues and fellow UU members from all over the US and beyond. Anyone, by the way, can attend General Assembly, but only delegates can vote. This year, about 3,400 folks attended General Assembly from June 20th to June 23rd. And as I mentioned, everyone was online this year. Next year, we'll be in Baltimore, but online participation will also be possible. In addition to conducting the routine business of the organization, there are all kinds of opportunities to attend presentations and workshops designed to inform people what's going on in the UU world and to provide them with resources to bring to their congregation. There are also lots of opportunities to gather with identity-based groups within the UU world. Groups like UU Jews or UU Christians, LGBTQ UUs, UUs of color, UU religious educators, and the list goes on and on. Several members of our congregation attended General Assembly, and a few of them are going to share with you what they took away from it, what they are bringing back to our congregation based on their participation in both issues that came up for a vote and perhaps some of the special offerings of which they took advantage. By the way, you remember that a couple of weeks ago at our service, we showed a video of a General Assembly program that our congregation was invited to present. We were thrilled to have the opportunity to do so, thrilled to bring our social justice work to General Assembly. This week, we're focusing on the other side of the coin, if you will, what we took away from General Assembly. Here's what was on the agenda. The most important and time-consuming was the proposed revision to Article 2 of our bylaws, the part where our UU values are found, what in the past was called the Principles and Purposes section. Delegates, by well over the required 2/3 vote, adopted a new statement of shared values to amend Article 2. This vote was the culmination of a multi-year process of discussion, offering proposed amendments, and a vote at last year's GA, which was required to continue to finalize the changes this year. The result is a naming of our shared values as equity, generosity, interdependence, justice, pluralism, and transformation, all centered around love. There was a very emotionally charged discussion of a proposed business resolution which stated embracing transgender, non-binary, intersex, and gender diverse people is a fundamental expression of our UU religious values, and that passed by a 92% vote in favor. The tragic situation in the Middle East also loomed large over GA. An action of immediate social witness entitled Solidarity with Palestine passed by a 74% vote, and a responsive resolution calling for the immediate release of all hostages held by Hamas and acknowledging the suffering of Jews passed by a 77% vote. Other actions of immediate witness included one relating to climate change and one centering love amidst the ongoing impact of COVID. General Assembly also included many uplifting services, powerful sermons, speeches, and lectures, as well as workshops, sharing groups, and just opportunities to connect with others. I hope that helps you to understand what GA is and what was on the agenda this year. As I'm sure you are, I'm looking forward to hearing what our members who attended took away from GA.
And speaking of those members, we're now going to hear from Bill Dalsimer, followed by Ann Geyer, Jean Marie Stine, and Paula Peace.
Good morning. When I was asked to speak about the recent changes to the purposes and principles to our Unitarian Universalist covenant, I thought a personal story would be a good starting point. My son, who has lived in Cambodia for 7 years, for the first time this summer brought Lily, his 4-year-old Cambodian-American daughter, to the U.S. to meet her American family. Lily's arrival drew my 3 children, their 2 spouses, and 5 of my grandchildren together for the first time in many years. Lily won our hearts, playing games, splashing around in the lake, learning to swim, sitting on the couch, reading stories with the older kids and adults, playing with our dog. She captivated us with her questions, smiles, friendliness, and her endless joy and wonder. In the midst of this visit, a miracle occurred. Love for Lily sparked increased acceptance, kindness, patience, and joy in our family. Love was at the center. Section 2 of our bylaws, purposes and principles, define a set of shared core values and beliefs for Unitarian Universalists. It is the closest we UUs have to what other religions and spiritual organizations call a creed, but it is not a creed. In the words of the opening hymn, a tranquil stream, as tranquil streams meet and merge, our shared purposes and values, our core values are not lifeless, but free for free to address social issues that fail to address human needs. A UU member is not required to adopt these purposes and values as their act of faith. Individualism survives. The 7 principles of Article 2 adopted in the 60s, along with the words our fellowship's own unique covenant, have been the glue that binds us together in spiritual community. I would also include our hymnal, singing the living tradition, the closest thing we have in my mind to a Bible. Our hymnal offers classical hymns, traditional songs, spiritual and chants from many traditions, and words of inspiration and comfort from prophetic men and women of many different faiths, wise words inspiring songs. The 7 principles, which have been so important for me for over 6 decades, have been recently recast with some expansion, naming an element within the 7 principles that was implied but never spoken. Does anyone know that unspoken word now brought front and center as the connector and intersection of all our core values? Yes, I see a hand in the back of the room. You know that word? Love. Yes, love. Say it loud and clear. Love. Article 2 amendments, in addition to a brief text for each word, offer a graphic presentation of our core values, placing the connecting word love at the center. The 6 core values, as Tom told us, are equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, justice, and interdependence, each expressed in a single word with deep meanings, while retaining the concepts of the 7 principles. Shortly, you will hear more about the brief texts which accompany each word from Kathy and Paula, who will do the heavy lifting today. These 6 core values challenge us to explore new ways in love to address some matters overlooked or long ignored as we pioneer in our living tradition to form more perfect and inclusive communities. Just like Lily became the miraculous center of our family to come together, so love, now placed at the intersection of our core values, will serve as the connector and catalyst to inspire us on our spiritual journeys. May it be so.
Good morning, Fellowship. I'm Ann Geyer, and I was honored to serve as one of your delegates to General Assembly this year. Since this was my first GA experience, my biggest concern was to better understand to the greatest extent I could the issues we would be voting on, in particular, the much debated changes to Article 2. As such, I spent much of my time in sessions that provided a platform for other delegates and attendees from different congregations all over the U.S. to present their arguments for and against those changes. And wow, I was not expecting the level of passion and conviction I heard from UUs of all ages and identities from all over the country. It was truly an emotional experience to listen to them as I found myself being sort of swayed back and forth by each of their arguments. And they all had good points. So in the end, I voted really with my conscience based on what they said. I spent the rest of my time, probably not surprisingly, in sessions focused on religious education, or better known as RE in our UU lingo. As chair and lead teacher of Young Explorers, our program here in San Miguel for children and youth, I was particularly interested in those sessions where I met RE directors from UU congregations of all different sizes, small, medium, large, from all over the US. And together we shared stories and ideas about the programs we lead. The other people in those discussions were really especially interested in knowing more about how we at the UUFSMA hold a single class for a multi-aged group, ranging from 4 to 14 years old. Many of them were just astounded and eager to know, how do we pull that off? How do we do it? So I told them. One interesting thing I learned from them, something I wasn't expecting, is that many congregations in the US experienced a significant reduction in their student bodies after the COVID lockdown finished and their congregation started meeting in person. Large numbers of their students just didn't return. And they were surprised. And I was, pretty shocked by that. But they, on the other hand, were surprised to hear that we here in San Miguel had the opposite experience. We actually gained new students after COVID. I'm sure probably some of that is because when we switched to all classes in Spanish, we were able to appeal to a broader population of children in San Miguel. So all in all, it was a valuable learning experience. And I believe that it will help me become a more effective volunteer. And thank you very much for listening.
I am here today because I have been asked to share my impressions of events at the GA that have had deep impact on my transgender, non-binary, and otherwise gender non-conforming family. But to place these in context, I feel I must share parts of my own experiences growing up that I have rarely shared with anyone. When I was 5 years old, I asked my cousin to dress me up as a girl, driven by some inner impulse. She did. Then went to get my mother and aunt to see the transformation. I promptly hid in the closet, somehow sensing that my appearance dressed as a girl would not be received with full approbation. My mother and aunt smiled and made light of it. But underneath, even at that age, I could sense a deep unease. Over the years, I would try on my sister's clothes when no one was home, or find some female clothing being tossed out somewhere in the neighborhood, or buy them at thrift shops, wear them a while, and then in shame, because I knew people would think me odd at the least, and the world would cave in on me, I would throw them out. We call this purging. Finally, in my mid-40s, with the help of a therapist friend, I found my way out of the closet and into daily life. But I was 5 years old when I first felt the impulse, and it never went away. Remember that. 3 years ago, in response to a sudden rise in anti-transgender hate, violence, and anti-transgender legislation, an action of immediate witness was passed in the GA as part of the free exercise of religion, called on UUs to defend and advocate for trans, non-binary, and intersex people, living in accordance with their inner sense of gender identity. I don't know how many of you are aware of it, but back in the States, over the past 2 decades, a whole generation of trans youth whose parents are UUers has been growing up, for whom the UU was a safe haven where they knew they would always be received with acceptance, support, and love. This year, that was pointedly codified in the proposed amendment to add the explicit statement to our bylaws that, quote, embracing transgender, non-binary, and intersex people is a fundamental expression of UU religious values. As you probably can guess, the younger members of the UU trans community, after the loving support they had encountered in the church, were looking forward to this bylaw change with wild enthusiasm and anticipated it being passed with ease. And they expressed those feelings in the chat columns running down the side of the screen during the discussion of the amendment before the vote. For those who might not be familiar with UUA procedure at GAs, any amendment to the bylaws must be discussed at the GA before the vote. Said discussion consisting of 5 people speaking for 5 minutes each in favor of the amendment and giving their reasons for its support, and up to 5 speaking for the same amount of time against it, giving their reasons. To ensure those speaking for or against amendments remained within covenant, moderators are installed to cut off microphones of participants if they seem to be speaking unkindly, unfactual, or disparaging of the contra point of view or those who hold it. In the case of this amendment, those opposed argued against the inclusion of trans youth in the resolution and offered the same talking points that the right wing and anti-trans entities and legislators had been pushing. One spoke of what he called gender dysphoria as a choice in validating trans youth's deepest understanding of themselves. Yet recent surveys of trans people who had received hormones when young and then gender affirmation surgery as adults found only 1% regretted their decision. He then proceeded to get his facts about puberty blockers and hormones wrong, quoting the anti-trans Cass review commissioned by the British Health Service, which has been denounced by many mainstream health organizations as unscientific, and he carefully admitted the fact that the compilers had not interviewed a single trans person. Not one of the population it purported to be studying. This individual was allowed to speak for the full 5 minutes without interruption and was followed by others who also objected to the amendment. Meanwhile, the open-hearted joy with which UU trans youth had been listening to those in favor of the amendment turned to incredulous horror and anger in the chat boxes. One wrote, "I don't need to take a deep breath. I need a moderator to address this counterfactual claims from the con line." Another wrote, "I really do not understand how many of the con speakers are not being called out of covenant. They are claiming trans kids should not get care. Finally, out of many, 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 why are the moderators still letting people hurt us when we have said clearly in the chats that what they are saying is harmful? Isn't there some kind of covenant? As soon as the cons were finished speaking, Reverend Jakaran Olaoya of the UU Church of the larger fellowship, who had been tracking the chats and seeing the horrified reactions of trans youth, stepped into the silence that followed and began to chant reassuringly, "I love you, I love you, I love you," and did not stop for a full 5 minutes. Fortunately, fear and heartbreak turned to ecstasy the very next day, when the bylaws amendment was passed by a resounding 91% and a denomination that is legendary for having as many different opinions as there are congregants in the UU. It was a triumph. In short, we showed what we are made of, that the UU is truly based on love, and that we cannot cease to continue educating and confronting damaging ideas from the largest society of which we are a part. And we did ourselves, our trans congregants, and our trans youths proud. As UU lay minister and trans man Alex Capitan wrote, "This is fire. This is incredible. Full stop." I would hazard a guess that it is the most powerful, high-level denominational statement of support of trans people any organized religion has made. Amen. Ashe. Blessed be.
Thank you, Bill and Anne and Jean Marie. My name is Paula Peace, and these reflections all together today remind us that we UUs are a diverse faith tradition and have a multitude of different priorities. At the annual General Assembly, one can revel in the supportive fellowship with several thousand other UUs and be enriched by the gathering, which itself aspires to operate as a democratic, beloved community. But why does what goes on at UU General Assembly have anything to do with us here in central Mexico? A little bit of governance background. The UU Association bylaws mandate that Article 2 of the bylaws be reviewed every 15 years. Reminder, Article 2 includes the UU principles and purposes as the foundation of all things UU. The last significant revision of Article 2 was in 1987. In 2020, the UUA board appointed an Article 2 study commission. After collecting input from thousands of UUs, the commission presented a proposal, and all this led up to the final vote on the proposed new Statement of Shared Values at the June 2024 General Assembly. In past General Assemblies, I had almost ignored the tedious debates of the business sections. My focus here was with our Sunday services. So at previous General Assemblies, I focused on the worship services at GA, the music choices, the videos, the live band of instrumentalists, the readings, thinking that what spoke to my heart might also speak to hearts right here in our own fellowship. But this particular General Assembly, my most important responsibility was to vote as an official UUFSMA delegate. I found the discussion and debate among highly intelligent, diverse UUs, as Geyer said, to be animated, passionate, confusing, and sometimes worrisome. You might say there was diversity and drama. Articulate UUs spoke up pro and con the proposed new statement of values. I listened to one UU describe the great connection they felt to our long-standing 7 principles, that for as far back as they could remember, those principles had been a big part of their youth and adulthood. The old principles were simply not to be replaced, and it was stated with great emotion. And then the next delegate would say what a great opportunity it was to reflect on our principles and update them with a new statement of values, with the deeper consciousness we've achieved as a progressive denomination, that we can now endorse a more inclusive set of values. We can move beyond white male leadership and be more inclusive when choosing our leaders, and more welcoming to marginalized peoples of every type. So there you have it, pro and con. Both sides made several convincing points with much passion. In the end, I bet that the new document would be more inclusive, and I cast my official delegate vote to approve the proposed new UU Statement of Values. And so, after several years of debate, the new language of shared values passed by a wide margin. There was a feeling of unity and pride that we had done important work. You might say that there was diversity and drama, and then resolution through democracy. So what about the new companion UU flower, the new visual image of our shared values? Diego, that's your cue. Okay, so there's a flower with petals, and of course, love is at the center. What's the big deal? This seems obvious and not at all surprising. The petals of the flower are different colors to represent different challenges of living as global citizens and in beloved community. One could simply proceed in a circle in either direction around the big flower, or one could pair petals with different lines. But always, always, love is at the center, no matter the activity. At the center, burning in the middle of the UU chalice and flame, there is love. All caps, all central, simple, encompassing, connecting all to all, each part essential to completing the beauty and balance of the flower. Love at the center. This is certainly not the only way our shared values can be expressed visually, but this flower of shared values does, in my opinion, offer one a prescription for living day to day. It reminds us to seek the love at the center as one interacts with colleagues and friends, as one tries to contribute to the UUFSMA beloved community. It's more simple than we might think. Interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, justice, all out of love. Love at the center. My personal prayer is that my understanding and practice of this flower of love grows through the coming years. I believe I can be a happier, more positive, and more collaborative person by embracing love at the center. And as a global, beloved community of conscience here in San Miguel, may we all find some inspiration and sustenance from this little flower with the big petals. May we all aspire to keep love at the center. With your permission, I'd like to invite Kathy to join me in sharing with you the exact text that we've all been alluding to, the new statement of values for Unitarian Universalism, with the help of the new shared values flower. Interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence with reverence for the great web of life, and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it.
We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships.
Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology.
We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect.
Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive.
We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large.
Transformation. We adapt to the changing world.
We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect.
Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope.
We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality.
And finally, equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness.
We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities.
I think we want to applaud, don't we?
And speaking of money, We will now receive the offering for the support of this religious community and its work, so that we can make our values and goals into realities. You are invited to give generously and joyfully as you are willing and able. I invite you to stand, rise in body or spirit, to join voices together in song for hymn number 131, Love Will Guide Us. It is in your hymnal and the words will appear on the screen. We close with closing words, continuing with the words of Esther Hurlburt. No siempre es fácil encontrar el amor en el centro. Así que hoy nos reunimos en convenio para celebrar la realidad que el amor está en el centro de nuestro ser y que el amor nos guiará si nos abrimos a los desafíos que el amor exige de nosotros. It is not always easy to find love at the center. So for today, we gathered in covenant to celebrate the reality that love is at the core of our beings, and that love will guide us if we open ourselves to the challenges which love requires of us. May we accept this challenge with dignity and grace, que aceptemos este desafío con dignidad y gracia. Please remain seated for the postlude.